Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Today, I am honored to have David Allison join us on the GDA podcast, Backstage Pass. David is an engagement and influence expert, human values research pioneer, a two-time best-selling author and CEO of a global research firm called Value Graphics Research Company. I met David, I think it was last summer in Canada. I went to hear him speak, and we've just been enjoying his content ever since. He is really changing how organizations connect with people with such remarkable research breakthroughs. And for the first time in history, he's turned our shared human values into data and insights. People often refer to David as the values guy because he has surveyed more than 1 million people in 152 languages about their values, who they are on the inside, what makes them tick, and why they do the things they do. So, David, welcome to the show. I'm so eager to get into all of your content.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I can't wait to chat.
So before we really dive in, let's start with the big picture. Can you explain, I just said a lot of words, but can you explain your expertise and your methodology around values and why it's such a game changer?
Yeah, I can talk about this in all kinds of deep, nuanced ways with methodologies and statistics, but really what it all comes down to is that everything that goes on in an organization or an industry or a company, it's all about getting some people to do something. Everything, when you think about it, sales, leadership, marketing, human resources, employee engagement, AI introduction into all of these things. It's really all about just getting some people to do something. And people only do anything, this is a neurological truth, people only do anything if it's aligned with their values. So if you rewind that, if you understand values, you understand people. And if you understand people, you understand everything. And so values are kind of the secret code that we need to understand for groups that we're trying to engage and influence and motivate and inspire, for everything from sales to leadership to employee engagement, you name it. We know their values, or their value graphics, as we call them. You kind of know what you need to know.
For as long as I've been working, which is many, many decades, I feel like businesses and organizations have really relied more not on the values, but on demographics. And they feel like, if they understand the demographics, then they understand their customers. If they understand the demographics, they understand their employees. I know you have a different viewpoint. So why do you think that demographics are failing us?
Well, another word for demographics, just to make it a little more human, is labels. Right? So I wear a bunch of labels. I'm a man. I happen to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm a certain age. I'm a baby boomer. So those are my labels. And they tell you nothing about who I really am, because I'm not the same as all the other guys out there. I'm not the same as all men. I'm not the same as all baby boomers. Right now, there's a whole lot of people running around talking about Gen Z, for example. It's a demographic label. And trying to convince us that the 60 or 70 million Gen Z in the United States of America alone, let alone around the rest of the world, are somehow the same as each other. And they're all going to respond to the same things. It's kind of nonsensical when we sit back and think about it. Gail, for you, for example, are you the same as all women who are baby boomers? It's kind of nonsense.
No.
For sure not. So we know this. Everybody listening, hey, everybody, you all know this inside your heart, that demographic labels aren't a really great way for us to understand how to engage and motivate people, because they're super inaccurate. And yet we sit in our boardrooms and we go, what are the demographics of our audience? What are the demographics of our employees? How do we use the fact that we know these demographic things about them to try and understand them? So my research, these million people we've talked to, a million and counting people we've talked to around the world in 152 different languages. It boggles my mind sometimes when I think about all that. We've now got stats to back this thing we all feel. We've got stats to build to back this up. So when we look at these million folks around the world and say, how similar are they when we put them in demographic groups? So how much can you say that Gen Z are all like this, or baby boomers are all like that, or people who earn $250,000 a year are all like this? And across the board, the answer is it's about 10.5%. So 10.5% similarity inside any of those groups. So when you think about that, if you spend $1 trying to, engage and influence and inspire people using demographics, it means you're kind of going into that situation with about a 10.5% possible success rate. You're going to be 90% wrong right out the gate. And that's not a really great number. So we need a different way to understand who people are. Demographics still have a use. Those labels help us understand that, I don't know, we're selling $1 million penthouses in downtown Gotham City. It's not going to go to the young woman who works at the checkout counter at the grocery store across the street. We know that demographics still, these labels have a role to play, but what we've been doing wrong is assuming that since we know what people's labels are, we also know who they are on the inside and what makes them tick. And that's just not accurate at all. It's just not accurate.
Mentioned sales, and I know you have a talk that specifically is on sales and how most sales teams focus on pain points and
Mm.
demographics. How can understanding the values make a sales team dramatically more effective?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's pick that apart. I like that language. Pain points and demographics. So you're sitting around with your sales team. You've got some strategic ideas you're thinking about. You've identified a pain point or two in the customer journey, whether we're talking about B2B or B2C. So then the next step in that conversation is around this pain point. What are we going to do there? What's our strategy going to be to make that go away so that we increase sales? And so now you start using demographics to try and understand these people and say, well, if that's the pain point, and we know they're all aging baby boomers who have $1 million in the bank, then therefore we should try this or that. And, as we've just talked about, demographic labels are not a great way to understand people. But if you know for your target audience, whether it's in a sales and marketing perspective, or this also works for employee engagement and the pain points inside an organization, if you know what they care about and how they're making all their decisions and what values alignment means for them, and not just based on, wishful thinking and poetry and pretty words that make us all smile, but on data, well, then you can say, listen, for this pain point, for this group of people, we need to make this about, let's say, personal growth. We're going to show them how we understand that solving this pain point in a way that's about their personal growth is going to help them get over that particular pain point. So no, it tells you what to say and how to say it and how to interact with people and how to put strategies and tactics in place that they will respond to because it's what's in their heart. It's what they're waking up every morning and looking for, which is more of what we value. It kind of makes me think we should back up a step and talk about that. The basic premise behind why we're so focused on values. So our brains have a very specific way that they solve problems for us. Every decision we have to make about whether we're going to buy product A or B or work at company A or B, what sweater we're going to wear this morning. When you were in the jewelry store shopping for that necklace, you made a decision. And the way our brains make decisions is they look at the possible options and they say, which one is better aligned with our values? You don't know you're doing it. It's a split-second thing that goes on inside a piece of your brain called the insula, which is inside your prefrontal cortex. And when you make a decision that's aligned with your values, this necklace versus that one Gail's saying to herself in the store, you get a dopamine hit. Your brain goes, good for you. You made the right choice. That you made the choice that's aligned with your values. And that's how we've evolved as humans and how we've learned to do the things that are in our own best interests and carry on, with the evolution of the species. So if you understand what people's values are, you know what the decision-making set is going to look like. What are the filters they're using to make a decision about whether they're going to work with your company, buy your product, show up at work engaged, be excited about AI, not be excited about AI. All the problems we're all trying to solve every day can be solved far more easily if we understand what people's values are and how their brains are going to think about that thing and how they're going to make that decision. So, back to your very simple question that I'm giving you a giant long answer for, pain points that you try and solve by understanding what people's values are, you're actually using neurology and dopamine to help you get through some of these obstacles and challenges that you're facing.
So basically, GDA Speakers is a sales organization, and we probably actively each year work with 300 clients. So are you saying to be more effective with those existing clients and potential clients, we need to understand their values? And if that answer is yes, does that mean we survey our clients? How does
Oh,
that work?
oh yeah, really great question. So first off, the answer is yes. If you know the values of your clients, then you know how to frame up every conversation, every piece of outreach that you're doing, every incoming inquiry. If it's from an existing client, you'll know how to talk to them about the things you want to try and get them to do by basically saying, listen, this isn't what you're saying to them, but what's happening is you're going, I know who you are. I know what you're looking for, values. And so I'm going to talk to you in a way that's aligned with that so that you go, wow, it's like these people have been reading my diary. That's just perfect. This is exactly what I've been looking for. So the way we do that is we provide you with that data. And Gail, if you want to do this with your clients, I'd be happy to do this with you. Where we sample a small number of folks who fit into that population of whoever it is we're studying. And then based on what they tell us, and we get them to answer about 10 questions, we use their information to go into our benchmark database of hundreds of millions of data points and say, oh, we know who those folks are. This is what we know about. We know this and like this, and like this, and like this. I mean, there's this massive dashboard of information that we can come back and say, hey, people just like those, here's all the stuff we know about them. Here's their values, their wants, their needs, their expectations, all this stuff about what buttons you need to push to move the needle in the right direction. And
Okay.
by the way, that's what we do for a keynote. I have a research company, the Value Graphics Research Company, and we have clients who come to us, and that's what the product is. They ask for those dashboards with all that information about whoever they're trying to reach and engage with. And so each time I get booked for a keynote, we go through that entire process and we have all of this information. We have enough information to write a PhD on whoever it is my audience wants to understand. And I get up on stage and I give them the benefit of all of that stuff. It's a full scale research undertaking to prepare for a 1 hour keynote. We all talk about doing custom keynotes in this business. Well, I'd love to meet somebody who's more custom than what we're able to do. I sometimes think it's a little ridiculous, the amount of work we go to, but it makes it so much fun. I get to be up on stage and say, listen, for a sales audience, leadership audience, employee engagement, whoever, I know you all are trying really, really hard to inspire and motivate and engage this group of people, whether it's customers, employees, whoever it is. And I have the secret answers for you. Here we go. Let's look at what the data says. You need to talk to them this way. You need to say these things. You need to be able to connect the dots for them between this and this. And it's just magic how it can transform the work that my audience gets to go and do after they walk out of that room. It's very fulfilling as a speaker. So
I want to pivot because we talked a lot about sales and understanding your clients and then, framing the conversation with their values. But also, you mentioned briefly leadership. And I know that's an area where values can make a huge impact because leaders with value-based insights can build stronger teams and improve their workplace culture. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I do. And think of the best way to talk to you about this. ASAE, an organization that many of your clients probably are members of, the American Society for Association Executives. So for those of you who don't know the acronym, the ASAE is an association for people who run associations. And so I spoke twice now. They worked so well the first time they brought me back to do it again for a different group, to a group of leaders and said, listen, here's their brief to me was we as leaders in the association industry right now, given what's going on politically in the United States, is very, very divisive times inside our associations, our boards of directors, our members. There's ideological divides. And it wasn't in our job description to be referees and try and help people come together and be a functioning association doing the work that we're supposed to do. So how can you help us? So what we did was we profiled people who belong to associations in the United States of America, who've been a member for at least 5 years, and who also have volunteered on at least one committee or been on the board for one term or something. So we know these are committed people to that association. And then we split them, Republican versus Democrat, and we looked at where their values overlap. And then the keynote I was able to give for those leaders in the room was to say, listen, when fights break out, when disagreements happen, get people to realize they have these things in common. This is common ground you can stand on so that you can figure out how to move forward in a more productive way. And also, let's start building your association programming and all the touch points and things that are happening inside your organization in a way that leans into these shared values to reduce the opportunity for these disagreements and divisiveness to erupt in the first place. So it's just one example of how, as a leader, if you understand what's motivating your teams and what their hot buttons are, essentially, what are their values, well, then you understand how to resolve conflict, you understand how to inspire, you understand how to get them to adopt new ways of working, new policies, things that are going on inside the organization. It's that thing we continually have been looking for in the leadership world, which is what do I need to say and do to be a more effective leader and to get my teams energized and excited and ready to come to work and crush our goals.
Does it work equally as well with a small team or a really large organization?
It does in very different ways. I mean, small teams, we have another tool that we can use with small teams. We have a new collaborative product that we've launched with a group out of the States. It's called a values identifier. And it's kind of our competitor for Clifton Strengths and for DISC assessments and all these things. So people take a 30-minute series of questions, about 150 questions, and they get a 30, 40-page report on their own values, what drives them, where their blind spots are, what makes them the people that they are in their personal and professional lives. And then with a small group of leaders, I'll come in and we'll work through how to use that information to develop your own leadership style and help you understand how to lean into your strengths and notice where your weaknesses are and why some people you get along with great and other ones you don't, and how to resolve conflict and all these other kinds of things. With larger groups, it's really interesting to be able to segment the workforce in different ways. Right now, many large organizations will segment their workforce and try and figure out how to put programs and services in place to optimize each segment, but the segments are based on demographics or they're based on seniority level, and the people inside those particular buckets really don't have anything in common other than the fact they happen to be, a certain age and they're a senior vice president or above, and it doesn't mean that anything you're going to do for that group is going to work across the board. So instead, if you segment your workforce and say, we got some folks in here who are so motivated by anything that has to do with relationships and family, and another group in here who is so motivated around anything that has to do with personal growth and ambition. Well, now it's pretty obvious, even with just those two little data points, how you would put things in place that work for the ambition and personal growth group versus the family relationships group. Totally different approaches, but it's not guessing anymore. You're not clumping people together and using labels and stereotypes to try and understand what's going to motivate them.
Love that. We talked about the application in sales and we talked about the application in leadership. I'm curious, with you being a speaker, what types of events you're most often booked for. We're just coming out of sales kickoff season.
Yeah.
And we're kind of moving into the incentive trip season. And then, of course, we have leadership conferences all the time. We've got nonprofits. You mentioned associations. I'm curious, where is this landing? What audiences?
Yeah. You remember when you and I first met, and we were in Toronto, and we were walking
Yes.
walking down the street in Toronto, and it was our first conversation. We just walking along, heading out to something together. And we were talking about how there's so many speakers in the industry who say I can speak about anything, and how it's kind of a joke. It's anybody who's in the industry knows that that's the sign of a rank amateur, right? I'll speak about anything. But the more I talk to you about how my talks are about people, and that people are understanding how to engage, motivate, and inspire people. That's the key for leadership, for sales, employee engagement, workplace culture, AI introduction into the workplace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You turned to me and you said, you really can talk about anything. And we had a little laugh about that and how it's not a very successful sales strategy for me because nobody's calling the bureau and saying, do you have one of those talk about anything speakers over
Yeah.
there? So that's not, it doesn't really help me all the time. But where does it land mostly? We got a lot of bookings, anything that has to do with numbers, any industry that has to do with numbers. So, financial services, banking, credit unions, wealth advisory. Those are folks who like this to be about data. And they had a lot of speakers come and talk to them about mission and vision and values and its unicorns and rainbows and warm, fuzzy feelings and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm coming in and talking to them about that stuff with data. And so suddenly it's clicking for them. And they're like, oh, that makes so much sense now because it's empirical. It's not just warm, fuzzy hugs. So that's one area where we get booked a whole lot. All kinds of other really interesting things coming up that I would never have guessed as we started leaning into this research. So things like reputation change. You think about all the industries out there who are trying to change how they're thought about in the public. So mining, forestry, chemicals, uh, pharma, et cetera, unions. Everybody has every industry has a slightly different way they'd like the general public to think about them. And so I get up on those stages and say, listen, you want to tell your story. You got to remember, it's not what you think is important. Here's the values of the people you're talking to and how you need to frame up your story so that they understand and go, oh, actually, I hadn't. Okay, cool. I get that. So that's a place that's been really surprising. Call it reputation management or human resources or something like that. The other place that I really enjoy and it's not, again, not something I thought would sort of where this would go, but um, there's been so many speakers lately, and for the last, I don't know, since I've been involved in this business, who you could put into a bucket and call them generational speakers.
Yes.
They come up and they talk about baby boomers want this, Gen Z wants that. Remember, it was millennials for a while. They were eating all the avocado toast, and there was all kinds of things about them that we had to know. Uh, well, our data and our all of our research and the entire field of neurology and psychology and sociology that I bring with me up onto stage disproves generational stereotypes, and this generational stuff is just nonsense. So I'm getting booked a lot as sort of the antidote. Oh, last year we had the Gen Z speaker. And I'm like, well, let me come and rip that to shreds for you. I'll get up and talk about why that's ridiculous and we should be thinking about somebody else. So I'm being booked as the anti generational guy. So that's getting me a lot of interesting responses. People in the audience are initially kind of like, but uh, and then and then they kind of and they're by the time it's over they're like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. Why haven't we thought about things like that before? And then the last one I'll throw out that is kind of a big Uber category is anything that's about trying to bring people together and unite them. We've had I had a nurses union, for example, booked me to come and speak to them about the shared values of nurses so that they could support each other and understand each other and be more united as an occupation and as a profession. We've done this recently with indigenous business owners across the country. How can we I'm an indigenous man myself, so how can we lean into our shared values and become a bigger, stronger voice and more supportive of each other? And I have one coming up for, I'm not even quite sure how to describe this, but this is leadership teams from major universities and colleges all across the United States. who are all getting together for their annual conference. And what's happening inside the higher education ecosystem right now is that there's a lot of discord between students and faculty and staff and administration. It's a tumultuous time in that industry. So we've profiled all of those different stakeholder groups, and I'm getting up on stage to say, here's some things you all agree on. Here's the places where you're the same. And so this is good common ground to stand on while you try and work through the things that make you different. So bringing people together, changing reputations, generational nonsense, and anything that has to do with spreadsheets. The list goes on and on and on, but those are some fun ones that have been happening.
It's a long list and many unique applications. Has there ever been like a unique or unexpected way that you've seen the organization use the values that's created impact?
Huh. I just did a day long, it's not really a keynote, it was a workshop, but it was a day long workshop, a deep, deep, intensive workshop with, I don't think they'll mind me talking about this, my friend Laurie Anderson, who runs the International Sign Association, big, huge professional association. They have a trade show every year that about 20,000 people show up for. And so to prepare for this workshop, what we did was profile all the people who go to their trade show. And then I sat with their executive team, their board of directors, a couple of steering committees. We had about 40, 50 people. And we spent the day dissecting their entire trade show customer journey from sign up to arrival to like registration experience, what that's all about, programming, networking, the commerce side of the equation on the trade show floor, post event communication, and made all of those things aligned with the values of the people who are showing up. So now they have this kind of a roadmap that they're walking out of that room with after 7 hours together. Really intense work. Everybody was like, really, I loved that group so much because they just like, they got it and they were just so into it. Came up with all these incredible new ways to make that very successful show even more successful so that people who are showing up feel like this is the most amazing experience they've ever had. And of course, I'm coming back next year and I'm going to be a bigger donor and I'm getting a bigger trade show booth and I'm going to bring more folks from my office. So that was a really unique application. I'd love to do more of those kind of like, I mean, we're all in the events business at the end of the day, right? So being able to use
Or
this research to make events better is a really exciting application.
that's great. You know, we said on the front end that you've done I think, 1 million surveys in 152 languages. I'm curious if there are some universal values
Mm.
that sort of transcend culture, transcend geographical boundaries. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, two things. Siri just tried to jump in on our conversation here. I'm not sure
Well,
why.
Siri, come on. I guess Siri has values too. Needs to be heard.
Oh, poor Siri. Just gets ordered around all the time.
Yeah.
So two things on that. The first one, I think the most hopeful, beautiful, universal finding across the whole database. Remember, it's 180 countries that we're accurate for. So this is truly global information.
Yeah.
Um, there's only 56 values. So when you think about the fact that all of us, 9 billion, whatever of us there are on the planet, we wake up every day. And as we've talked about, every decision we make all day long is driven by values alignment. And there's only 56 of them. We're not as different from each other as some people would like us to believe because it suits their purposes to put a line in the sand and say you people are like that and you people are like that. It's only 56 things. There's 9 billion of us on the planet. I mean, to put it into some kind of context, there's 88 keys on a piano. So it's more complicated to learn how to, I don't know, play chopsticks on the piano than it is to understand what drives all of us to be who we are and make every decision we make all day long. It's kind of beautifully uniting to think that there's not that much that makes us different from each other. But to answer your question very directly, what are some values that transcend all of these different categories and industries we've worked in? There's a cluster in that 56 values. There's a cluster of 5 values that we call the togetherness values. And they're relationships, family, friendship, belonging, and community. And all
Hmm.
around the world, every profile we've ever done for my speaking work, for the research company, everything from hedge fund institutional investors to donors to the United Nations Foundation to CMOs for PayPal to everything we've ever done. Always, always, always some number of those togetherness values show up. So the big takeaway is more than anything, humans just want to be together. Now, how we want to be together varies in 5 different ways, but we always want to be with each other. It's why we had so much trouble with COVID and being told we couldn't be together. It was deeply disturbing for all of us on at a values level. But yeah, togetherness values are definitely uniting all around the world.
I love that. That's a warm feeling to know that that's the case. Um, I know you speak to lots of different groups. How do you customize? You talked about it a little bit, but for the event planners listening and they're listening to all this content and all the ways you can present the material, how do you best customize your presentation to resonate with a specific audience?
Every audience wants me to help them understand how to engage, motivate, and inspire some group of people. That's the common thread. And
Okay.
so we use the research company to launch a study. And then I get up on stage, and for whoever it is my audience wants to engage and motivate and inspire, I have the irrefutable fact based data on what they need to do. And I teach them. I say, okay, for the folks you want to engage, whether it's leadership, sales, employee engagement, AI in the future, whatever it is, here's the hot buttons that are going to work for you. So let's frame up your messaging. Let's figure out your leadership strategies. Let's engage your sales force in a certain way, but without it being about guesswork or some big series of principles that might work for all sales organizations everywhere. No, it's these really specific ones. It's this button, and this button. These are the buttons you need to push in order to get the needle to move in the right direction. So it takes all of that kind of, it takes all the guesswork out. And it takes out all that kind of large scale thinking that may apply if it happens to align with the people. It's like, this is so precise. I can't use this same information tomorrow for the next keynote. There's no way. I have to rewrite the whole keynote every time I get up for a new group because every group has a different group of folks that they're trying to engage and motivate. So again, I think I made a joke about this earlier in our conversation. It's I can't think of anything where there would be more customization. It's like we're writing a PhD thesis for every single keynote. It's pretty cool.
Um, One of the questions I always love to ask a speaker is when you finish speaking and you go outside in the ballroom for a break or people are leaving, and certain people always come up to the stage and they want to talk to you or they want to seek you out during that break. What are people saying? What's the typical reaction? What do you hear most frequently?
That's a great question. Good question. Um, well, first off, it's important to know the context. I like being the opening keynote speaker as opposed to the closing keynote speaker because maybe it's coming across in this interview, but I got a lot of energy and I get up on that stage and get everybody super excited. So it's a really, even though it's a lot of data, it's a really upbeat, fun 1 hour.
It is.
Nobody's
I
phones
agree
or
with that.
everybody's phones in there. They're all sitting there. It's a cool. So when they come up at the end of it and they are crying or they want a hug or they want to tell me about how they can't unsee this now and how it spoke inside to their hearts and how it's just so affirming and oh my gosh, I've known this my whole life and now finally it's been proven true. uh it's an incredibly emotional, like most of the folks who come up to talk to me afterwards, it's gone from being this like really smart stuff about sales or leadership or employee engagement, and it's now personal, and they want to tell me how personal it was. And in fact, one of the things I've learned in the last couple of years is I have to be really careful in the airport as I'm leaving town, not to be in a pissed off mood or grumpy or something, because people come up to me and they're like, I saw you speak yesterday and I wanted to tell you, and I have this story for you about my wife or my children or my like, and so like I'm still on stage until I get on that plane and buckled in and everybody's sitting down and not allowed to walk around because,
I'm glad you know that because it's so true. It's so true.
uh,
It sounds to me like people feel seen and they feel heard.
they feel seen, they feel heard, and as much as a cliche it is, they feel changed. Uh,
Mm.
you can't unsee this. Like once I show you with very custom data for your particular situation, how you can use these few simple principles that, we've taken all this research to come up with these few simple things that are so customized. And once I show you how easy it is to use that to move the needle in the right direction, people are just like, it just makes things easy. It changes the way they think about themselves. It changes the way they think about the people around them, and it changes the way they think about the people they're trying to impact with their work. It's That's the most gratifying part of this work. I get to do a lot of fun things. Speaking, love speaking, research company. We've got some amazing clients we get to work with. But the best part of all of it for me is those little interactions afterwards where people come up and are saying that
Me
I've
too. That
really,
to me, that's how, there's this formula that a lot of speakers are talking about. PCT. What problem do you solve? What gives you the credibility to solve it? And what transformation can you expect the audience to see? And I think it's those interactions where you validate what the transformation is.
yeah,
I
validate the
like it.
transformation and know that it's a transformation that's so specific. Again, I got a lot of friends who are speakers and talk about what we do to get ready for speeches, and I show them like these dashboards that we build with like dozens and dozens of spreadsheets and
Yeah.
all this, and they're like, "What are you doing all that for?" Like because it feels it's what's right. I mean, we
It's your
can do
thing.
it, so why wouldn't we do it to make these
Yeah.
keynotes as powerful as possible?
That's awesome. I think this has been so eye-opening. And I'm curious if you wanted to leave the listeners with like one key message about the power of values, what would that be?
Okay, it's a two-parter. It's a two-part.
Okay,
Okay,
we'll
so
go.
first off, if you know the shared values of any group of people, employees, customers, donors, funders, shareholders, doesn't matter. If you know what their shared values are, you've heard me say this a couple times already, you know exactly what buttons you need to push to move the needle in the right direction. So that's cool. It's truly magical. But my one big takeaway message is even more important. It's even bigger than that. And it's about why we do the work that we do at my company. And it's this. What we're offering here is an alternative way of thinking about ourselves and other people. And the reason that's important is because the way we do that now is with labels. And those labels, as we were joking about, they're not very accurate. They are, in fact, sometimes quite hurtful. There are stereotypes about what, women are all like this and gay people are all like that. And like it's demographic labels lead you to stereotypes. And those stereotypes don't work. We found the data, 10.5% accurate within any one of those cohorts. So they're not doing us any favors. They're hurtful. But worst of all, they're this fuel for fires that are burning out of control. Fires of ageism and racism and sexism and homophobia and ableism and classism and dot 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 dot, all these things. Wherever you stand on this modern perspective that DEI isn't as important as it used to be, I think we can all agree that those stereotypical social ills are things that we need to be addressing. One incredibly powerful way to address them is to very, very simply just change the way we think about people.
Mm-hmm.
And just change the way, stop it with the stereotypes, and instead embrace this new way of thinking about people, which is what's in their hearts and what drives them. And if we can all do that, if we can all start by changing the way we think about ourselves, start there, because that'll force you to look at other people as being values-driven entities walking around all day long. And enough of us do that, it's not going to be immediate, but slowly and surely, we're going to change the way everybody looks at everybody, and we'll have changed the world. And that is the best reason of all to be thinking about things in a more values-driven way.
Awesome. Kind of goes back to that point you made about the universal values and the 5 belonging, it's all tied together. I guess you already knew that because you run a research company. It's amazing. And I think if there are people that are listening that want to bring a speaker in to their next event who really will just empower their organization to thrive on a whole new level, I think David is your guy. So, David, thank you so much for waking up early and getting with us and diving into your content. It's really been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Pleasure's all mine. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.